who knows what an Easter egg is? And I'm not talking like the Easter kind, but the media kind. You know what I'm talking about? All right. So I'm a bit behind on the times. I didn't know what an Easter egg was in terms of the media sense until like within the last few years, but I think that's been around since like the 1970s. So shame on me. Easter eggs, if you're like me and you don't know what it is, an Easter egg in the media sense are surprises that are inserted into like a story or a film by a creative for the viewer to discover. All right? And so this happens everywhere. Once you kind of see it, it kind of unlocks something in your brain and you find it everywhere. And there are so many social media accounts out there that if you can't find it, they can help you do it. And one of the best at dropping Easter eggs, the creatives dropping hints or things for us to find as the viewers into the story is Pixar. And I got a number of examples for you, all right? So we have Monsters, Inc. Any Monsters, Inc. fans? I'm using some kid illustrations with the whole next week in mind, all right? So let's just embrace our inner child this morning or this evening. So Monsters, Inc. came out in 2001. What's the red circle showing? Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo came out in 2003. And so there's just these Easter eggs that are being dropped of upcoming films throughout Pixar's history. Then you go to Finding Nemo. So this is the scene where the girl is in the dentist's office and there's like screaming and hysteria that's going on in the actual room with the dentist. And this kid is outside and he's hearing it. He freaks out. But what's the comic book he has? What's that pointing to? The Incredibles. You're right. The Incredibles comes out in 2004. Finding Nemo, 2003. The Incredibles comes out in 2004. But then you get to The Incredibles, and then what's the car that's circled? It's Doc Hudson from the Cars. And the Cars comes out in 2006. So you have The Incredibles in 2004. You have Cars in 2006. You find these Easter eggs. These are surprises that are inserted into these films and these stories that we love by the creators of the story to give the viewer a sense of discovery. And tonight, we're looking at a story of Mary and Martha. And the writer, Luke, this is Luke's gospel, and so Luke is dropping a couple of Easter eggs that are important for us as disciples of Jesus, all right? As we look at this story, there's a couple of these Easter eggs, and they communicate two things: the importance of discipleship with Jesus, as well as the availability of discipleship with Jesus. So communicate the importance of discipleship with Jesus and the availability of discipleship with Jesus. And so here's what we're going to do. I want to just walk through the story really briefly for us to kind of give us a sense of a lay of the land. And then I want to turn to these Easter eggs because I think they highlight the things that we need to know about walking with Jesus in this life, and then end with a diagnostic test. Sound good? A diagnostic test sounds thrilling for all of us, but I think it's going to be helpful. So here's my prayer in all of it, all right? Is that we leave with a better understanding and awareness of how to live and walk with Jesus in this life. That's the invitation that he gives us, for us to live and walk with him in the here and now. And for us, my prayer is that we leave this place with a better understanding and awareness of how to do that in our life. Sound good? Great. So let me walk through the story for us really fast, and then we'll look at a couple of the Easter eggs that are here. All right, so here's what verses 38 through 40 say. While they were traveling, so Jesus and his disciples, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. So this isn't the first time that we actually met Mary and Martha. We see them as some of the women that are traveling with Jesus, doing ministry with Jesus. But Jesus is on his way back to Jerusalem, and as he's on the way back to Jerusalem, Luke uses this story from Mary and Martha to communicate some things about discipleship with Jesus to us. And so as the story goes on, verse 39, she had a sister, speaking of Martha, had a sister named Mary, who also, so other people are doing this, Mary is there, she sat at the Lord's feet and was listening to what he said. And then verse 40, but Martha was distracted by her many tasks, and she came up and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? So tell her to give me a hand. So here's what's happening. There's a tension that's being built, or a comparison that's happening between these two sisters, right? So you have Martha, who seems like in that day and age, and if we're really honest, in a lot of ways, it's the way that we picture discipleship in this life as well. Martha would be the one that we would think we need to emulate. So she's the one that's hospitable, right? Jesus enters into her home. She's the one that's welcoming people into her home and providing care and concern for them. She's the servant. She's the one that's making sure that everybody's tended to and that their needs are being met, placing their interests above her own interests. She's the one that works hard. She's not lazy and sitting on her hands. She's the one that's hustling and bustling. She's showing some grit here in this story. Martha seems to be the one that we're to emulate, not Mary. But as we find in Jesus' words, we get a corrective to our understanding of what discipleship with Jesus looks like. We find this in verses 41 and 42. So Martha, assuming that Jesus is going to agree with her and call Mary to get up and help Martha with all the concerns around the home, Jesus surprises her and says, Luke records, the Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has made the right choice, and it will not be taken away from her. So Jesus lovingly corrects Martha's understanding as well as our understanding of what discipleship with Jesus looks like. Mary chose the one thing that is necessary. Mary is the one that chose the correct thing. Some of your translations may read the good portion. We'll get into that here in a second. And then lastly, he says, it will not be taken away from her. Look, this is really important instructions for us in terms of what it looks like to live and walk with Jesus in our life with him. And we find some very important lessons in some of the Easter eggs that Luke drops in this story that will be takeaways for us of what it looks like to live and walk with Jesus here and now, all right? So let me draw these out for us, all right? We see the first Easter egg in verses 41 through 42. The Lord answered her, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has made the right choice, and will not be taken away from her. So here's what we need to see in this first one. This story is only found in the Gospel of Luke, all right? So the common assumption of Bible teachers is that Martha shared this story with Luke herself, all right? So as we're reading these words where Martha is indicating that Jesus' response is Martha, Martha, it's almost as if she can just remember it and recall it because she was personally there. Like she was experiencing it. It wasn't just some other party that Jesus was looking at and addressing. It was Martha herself. The words, Jesus' look on his face, the tone of his words, it's as if they can hit her all over again because she was personally there. It was like her shoes that this took place. It also the story is found in a string of stories where Luke is using the stories of Jesus to instruct us on discipleship. All right, so the story just before Mary and Martha is the parable of the Good Samaritan, where Jesus is sharing with us what it looks like to be a good neighbor, or in other words, how we love our neighbor like God loves us. This is what discipleship looks like. He says, go and do likewise. The way the Good Samaritan treats the person that was on the road that was beaten and left for dead, Jesus is saying, you go and do likewise. You love your enemies, even the way that God has loved you. This is what he's saying, like discipleship with Jesus, life with Jesus looks like in this world. And then immediately after Mary and Martha, you get the Lord's Prayer. So Jesus' disciples, they saw that John the Baptist instructed his disciples how to pray. And so they're coming to Jesus saying, hey, we see how you pray. You teach us how to talk to God like you talk to God. So another discipleship story. This is what it looks like to step into a relationship with God. This is how you address him. This is how you talk to him. These are all discipleship-oriented things. And in the middle, we find the story of Mary and Martha. And all of this is intended to communicate the importance of Jesus' loving rebuke here. And in essence, Luke is saying, hey, this story is incredibly important for what it looks like to live and walk with Jesus. Martha was focused on activity for Jesus, and Mary was focused on relationship with Jesus. And it's almost as if, since Martha is the one that shares this story with Luke, and then Luke is taking this story and smashing it in between these discipleship-oriented stories that are meant to instruct us, it's as if Martha is saying, I had it wrong. Mary had it right. And Martha looks around her and sees that most people, like you and me, fall into the category of Martha. We're prone to function how Martha does and not like Mary. And so she's telling Luke, you have to share this story. And so as Luke is taking this story from Martha and he's thinking about how he shares how we walk with Jesus in this life, Luke is like, I have the perfect spot for it. Right after what it looks like to go and treat other people, and then also what you're doing in private and talking with God is right smack dab in the middle. Here's what it looks like to be in relationship with Jesus. This is discipleship 101. And here's the lesson that we need to find. Discipleship with Jesus is about relationship before activity. Discipleship with Jesus, living life with Jesus, is about relationship before activity. Look, much has been said about the struggles with distraction, which is what Jesus is reporting that Martha struggles with. She was distracted with her many tasks. I mean, we don't have to look very far beyond like some of the things that are reported about our smartphones, that the average person spends about 4 hours and 37 minutes per week on their phone. Maybe that's actually per day. I forget what it's. Yes, I'm getting shakes of head. It's per day. If you actually do the math of that, that's 70 days per year on your phone. Now, before we act like we're victims, that it's like it distracts me. It's all of the things that are popping up on my phone that are distracting me. The London, there's LSE, this School of Economics, London School of Economics reports that 89% of our activity with our phones is initiated by the user. So only 11% is actually by prompts on your phone, so don't act like a victim. This is actually you. We are prone to distraction, all right? This is just part of our human nature, our fallen human nature. But what we need to see tonight, beyond just like a general human thing, is that when it comes to discipleship, like Martha's trying to tell us, we are prone to be Martha, not Mary here. And we need to live into this. We swap activity for relationship. My wife and I experienced this in our own home this past week. So day was winding down, week was winding down. We were just doing a little bit of a check-in with one another. And we're both talking about just how crazy and wild the week was. And at the end of it, we're like, I just feel really disconnected from you. And here's what happened. I had a pretty hectic week this past week. Cherish was lovingly stepping in, trying to own more responsibility around our home and in the life of our kids throughout the week to give me space for the hecticness of my week. And as she's trying to create space for me by taking on more responsibility in the life of the home, I was refusing the space and trying to step in so I could help with the things that were happening in the life of our family. So we're both doing a lot of activity in order to serve one another, but yet at the end of the week, we're both like, I feel really distant from you. I don't know what's going on in your life. it feels like we're kind of strangers right now. Here's what happened. We put activity before relationship. Do you see that? Like, I'm going to do this for you. No, I'm going to do this for you. But then we miss the actual personal connection that happened in relationship. And where did it leave us at the end of the week? I just feel really distant from you. I think Martha and Luke are trying to tell us that we do this all the time with Jesus. We do this in our spiritual activity, but we also do it in the day-to-day life activity, all right? So take, for instance, the idea of resting or Sabbath, all right? Spiritual practice, spiritual activity, right? Here's what a lot of us do. If we do practice this, we create a lot of space for time for rest, and so we go spend a lot of time with friends. We do things that we really enjoy. We catch up on our shows, our books, our music, but we do all of this activity without the actual personal interaction with the God who is the one that brings restoration to our lives. So here's what happens. At the end of this day of rest, you may physically feel rested, but you are not restored. And it's why we, in our day-to-day lives or our week-to-week lives, is we're practicing this idea of the spiritual activity of Sabbath. At the end of the month, we're still saying, God, I feel disconnected from you. It's because we're doing spiritual activity, but we're not making personal connection. Do you see that? We do this in our day-to-day life too. Look, discipleship is all of life for all of life. All right? So it's not just like spiritual activity and we're just like segmenting our lives and then Jesus has part of this, but he doesn't touch this. No, genuine discipleship is all of life for all of life. And so think about like work and school. All right? Here's what typically happens for us. We work harder to learn like our business tactics or our school subjects than saturating ourselves in the riches of the gospel. We devote all of our time and attention, like anything that seems really important, our hearts and our souls immediately jump to that, and we lose focus on what actually has eternal significance. And so we get really good at knowing how we go make a buck or how we ace a test, but when it comes to the nourishment of your own soul, you're depleted because you've lacked in saturating yourself in the good news of Jesus. Or you think about the activities of the home. We tend more to making sure the projects around the house are kept up with or that the spaces in the home are clean than we do actually tending to the state of our own soul. Like as if the most important person in the world is going to show up on your doorstep at any moment of the day and be like, I got to make sure that the house is ready, you know? When in reality, it's like, no one's coming to your house, man. But you like hustle and you stress and live with anxiety over these activities that aren't bad, but aren't actually what replenishes your soul. We replace activity with relationship. We do it with Jesus all the time. And so what we need to do is there's a phrase that Jesus says here. He says, the one thing. Mary chose the one thing that was necessary. Jesus is borrowing other biblical language here, all right? There's one that he's borrowing it from the old, but then he's also projecting towards the new. Here's some of what we see. Psalm 27:4 says this, I have asked what? Say it again. I have asked what? From the Lord. It is what I desire. This is David speaking. Like it's what I want, it's what I need, it's what I long for. To dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Look at this. Gazing on the beauty of the Lord and seeking who? No, say it to me. Seeking who? Him. In the place where he dwells in his temple. Like Jesus has this psalm in mind These words of David, these longings of his soul, he's saying what David longed for is the day that's here for Mary. The one thing is here. The one thing that is necessary. The one thing that is actually the good portion, the one that's going to, what that means is like actually bring satisfaction to life. The longings and the cravings and the desires are actually fulfilled. And the thing that can't be taken away. Like Mary's chosen that thing. Relationship before activity. Look, you can't tell me that if Jesus would have looked at Mary and said like, hey, could you get me a drink of water? She wouldn't have gotten up and gotten him a drink of water, you know? But she pursues relationship before activity. Then, looking forward, Philippians 3:13 through 14, Paul says this, brothers and sisters, I do not consider myself to have taken hold of it, that he has fully taken hold of everything of who Jesus is. But look, but what? One thing I do, forgetting what is behind and reaching forward to what is ahead, I pursue as my goal the prize promised by God's heavenly call in Christ Jesus. What's the longing that Paul is sharing here that he has? What's the one thing? Relationship with Christ. It's like everything, all the accomplishments, all the success, all the business antics, all the grades, all of the preparation of the home, I set all of that behind me. The one drive of my life, the one desire, the longing, the craving of my soul that I give myself to is to knowing the relationship that I can have with the living God. Jesus is saying like, look, this is so crucial. If you want to live and walk with me, it's not activity before relationship, it's relationship before activity. It's not saying that there's no activity. That's why the parable of the Good Samaritan comes before this. It's like, no, there's still a call to go and act the life of Christ in this world. But look, it starts with relationship with him first. We're called to live out of the overflow of our own soul. And so Paul and Jesus and David are instructing us, hey, this is what it looks like to live and walk with God. Relationship before activity. Find it in the first Easter egg. Like, this is a story reserved for the Gospel of Luke. It's like Martha sharing this story with Luke personally because she knows how important this is for our walk with Jesus. But we see a second one in verse 39. It says this, Martha had a sister named Mary who also sat at the Lord's feet and was listening to what he said. All right, here's the second Easter egg. Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet at the dinner table. You're like, whoop-de-doo. To sit at someone's feet meant you were a person's student or disciple. We see this elsewhere in the New Testament. Paul speaks of it about his own life as he's given his testimony in Acts 22. He says, I am a Jew born in Tarsus of Cilicia, but brought up in this city, educated at the feet of Gamaliel. I was a disciple or a student of this esteemed, knowledgeable person of the word. I sat at his feet. I followed him. I mimicked his life. I did everything I could to be exactly like him. And here's what we find in this story, that a woman is sitting at the feet of Jesus as a disciple. And this broke all cultural norms. Women at this time were deemed as unworthy to receive instruction. There are stories that are told that as girls as little as 11 and asking for instruction on what a truth of the scriptures mean, that they were actually struck in response by nasty men who thought they were moral and thought they were above But what we find in Jesus is something quite opposite. Here's the lesson for us to see. Discipleship with Jesus is open and available to everyone. That's what we find, that Mary is at the feet of Jesus as a disciple. She's receiving the instruction of the living Jesus, God in the flesh, right before her. And she's not being rebuked. She's not being kicked away. Jesus has gladly and warmly received her, and what we should understand that is happening here is that discipleship with Jesus is open and available to everyone. Look, the grace of Jesus Christ knows no limits in making disciples. Here's what Galatians chapter 3, verse 28 says. There is no Jew or Greek, slave or free, male and female, since you are all one in Christ Jesus, since you are disciples of Jesus, since you trust in Jesus. That means ethnicity cannot limit who can be a disciple of Jesus. That means that social class cannot limit who can be a disciple of Jesus. It means that gender cannot limit who can be a disciple of Jesus. And what I love about this story is that it's not just about like, hey, there's this inclusivity that happens here. What struck me with this story is the wonder that Mary has that she's a disciple of Jesus. I mean, we see in Jesus' couple lines what it meant for Mary to sit at Jesus' feet. He says that this is the one necessary thing. This is the one thing that is the right choice that satisfies you. It's the thing that can't be taken away. You don't earn it. You don't earn your way into a relationship with Jesus, and so you can't earn your way out of it either. Like, this is the beautiful news of the good news of the gospel. And the wonder of all of this isn't lost on Mary. She looks around at her and how the rest of the world treats her, but then she sees the way that Jesus is looking her in the eye and giving her instruction about the scriptures, about life with God. And I mean, you can almost feel it from Mary that she's like, I can't believe I'm here. I can't believe this is me. I can't believe that Jesus is at the table and he's sharing his thoughts and his wisdom with me. That he's not just sharing and giving things off to me, like he's sharing his life with me. I'm sharing a meal with him. I'm walking, I'm doing these things with the Messiah that was promised since the beginning of time. Me. In the presence of Jesus. He's welcomed me. And look, too often, we live with a lack of wonder that we've been welcomed in by the King of the universe. Have you ever been around somebody that just like they get excited about something and then you get excited too? You've been around somebody like that? There's a pastor here in St. Louis, and he was like a quarterback in college, and he's just a dude that like rallies the troops. I mean, and I've had the opportunity to like be in the room where he's like leading some times of prayer, and y'all, gosh, like I'm ready to run through a wall after I'm with this guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, the excitement and the fervor and the passion that is exuded by him it's infectious. That's what we see in Mary. Like, Mary has this infectious spirit that she gets to be in the presence of Jesus. The privilege of it isn't lost on her. And Luke and Martha are communicating to us, look, the privilege of this, the beauty of relationship with God is available to everyone. in a sense, they're like, look, if Jesus brings in Mary, then it doesn't matter if you're Jew or Greek. It doesn't matter if you're slave or free. It doesn't matter if you're male or female. Welcome arms. It's all that he requires is that you're trusting in him. The King of the universe, God in human flesh. A sense of wonder. He's like, man, take this upon you. May you live with the sense of wonder. So the lessons of this story, like, they're so essential to our life with Jesus. That the importance, that relationship before activity, it's informative. It's instructive for what it looks like for us to live and walk with Jesus, that he truly desires for you to know him, and he wants you to come and open his life to him. Like he truly wants you. And then the fact that this is available to anybody and everybody, like the fact that those of us sitting in this room, knowing our stories, your backgrounds, ethnicities, social classes, genders, like all of us are welcomed in. It's like the sense of wonder should captivate us. So it's not only to be instructive, though, it's also to be kind of like a diagnostic test for our soul. It's not just to illuminate what life with Jesus looks like, it's also to read our soul. When you go to get a diagnostic test on the car, what do? Like, you take the scanner, connect it to the car, it reads the software of the car, and it tells you what the problem with the car is, right? Here's a reality for most of us coming in tonight. Like, most of us have a light or two that were lit up on the dashboards of our hearts as we came in here. Whether you're aware of it or now you're aware of it, like, you came in here with that experience, and as we walk through this story and you're reading about the comparison between Martha and Mary, and we're looking at the different takeaways from this particular story, you feel like you resonate with it and maybe even feel struck by some of it. In other words, like your soul has been read by this story. Here's what I do. I don't want to leave you with like, well, what do I do? I want to give us some questions to process that are kind of like the diagnostic questions so that we can, as we leave here, wrestle with these for our personal situations throughout the rest of this week, all right? So essentially, I want you to ask the question, how am I doing? How am I doing? Like my wife and I, at the end of the week, reconnecting and saying, I feel distant from you, is that you? And here, if that is you, here's the questions for you to consider. How's my wonder? How's my wonder? Is there an awestruckness to my soul? Does Jesus feel bland? Have I replaced things of least importance with the most important, and it's just left me with an empty soul? How's my wonder? Second question, how am I functioning? As you consider the comparison between Martha and Mary, does relationship come before or after activity for you in your life right now? How are you functioning? Is it, what can I bring to Jesus? Or is it enjoying Jesus and then pursuing the activities of the day with Jesus? You see the difference? Relationship before activity. And then as you wrestle with these, maybe one over the other, maybe both. Here's the question for you to ask yourself. what is God's invitation for me? What is he inviting me into? What does it look like? I was trying to wrestle with all these different ways that I could give you of how you respond to any situation that's going on. I can't give that to you. I can't give you a question, though. What is God's invitation? As you are struck or you feel red, what is he inviting me to step into with him this week? And then you do it. Maybe a couple of suggestions. All right, can't give you all of them, but here's maybe one or two. Spend time with people that do have wonder. That could be a passage. I mean, there's plenty of them, y'all. There are. You think about stories of Zacchaeus. The story of this man that was shunned by society, viewed as one of the most wicked people that could be in society of that day and age. Jesus is traveling through the city, and it seems like he's only traveling through the city to make connection with Zacchaeus. And what does he go do? He has a meal with Zacchaeus. We're going to look at the story in a few weeks, so I won't unpack all of it for you here and now. But man, the guy has wonder that Jesus is at his table sharing life with him. His response, there's an awestruckness, there's a wonder. Look, we're all like Zacchaeus too. We're all just spiritually bankrupt. And God has invited us into life with him. Not because of what we give to him, but because of what Christ has given to us at his own personal expense. Paying your debt on the cross. Sharing his life with you. His access to the Father with you. Maybe it's somebody that you know. We have a space where we're trying, we want you to step into relationship and walk with Jesus in this life, and that doesn't look like isolation. That looks like in relationship. So we have community groups, we have discipleship groups. Man, maybe there's somebody in your D group or community group that you're like, hey, I need to grab coffee with you this week. The wonder that you have, I need it to rub off on me. I need to get in the room. I need to pray with you. I just need to be in the space. When you get excited about things, I get excited about things. I see you get excited about Jesus. I need you to rub off on me. And so you go spend time with people and wonder. The second one may be that you pursue relationship before activity. That before you step into work and you open the computer and you open your email and you get into the day-to-day life of activity, before you step into spiritual practices and you neglect God for the activity that may come with the spiritual activity, maybe it's the just reminder that it's relationship before activity. And maybe that's sacrifice. You wake up 30 minutes earlier. There's a old Christian Martin Luther, you heard about him in school, way back when, right? He talked about, I have so much to do that I can't not pray. What was he doing? He's doing relationship before activity. He was like, work, work, work. I have so much to do today. This is in response to what are his plans for the day? And he says, in response, I have to pray before I step in. I can't do it apart from him. He's like, I got to be with my Lord. So it's maybe for you, it's stepping in to the reality that it's relationship before activity. And you cut some things out. You set the phone down. You know what I'm saying? Look, the beauty of the gospel is that we have a God who is infinite in power, yet so deeply desires relationship. And so the invitation for all is to live and walk with Jesus. The importance of it, we can't expound on it enough. The availability of it can't be stretched any further. So receive the invitation. Amen? Let's pray.